Purple smoke filled the royal nursery as another expensive vase crashed to the floor. Empress Vala rubbed her temples and watched her twin baby dragons float near the ceiling, their tiny wings beating rapidly as they giggled at the chaos below. The latest babysitter, a highly recommended reptilian nanny named Miss Scales, was backing toward the door with her once green skin now bright purple from embarrassment and fear. "Your Imperial Majesty," Miss Scales stammered, her voice shaking. "I have cared for younglings from 17 different species across the galaxy, but these little ones are impossible." She clutched her bag tightly as Smoke, the smaller of the twins, blew a perfect smoke ring that settled around her head like a crown. "They turned my skin purple. Do you know how long it takes for a reptilian's natural color to return?" Ember, slightly larger than her brother, teleported directly in front of Miss Scales with a soft pop, causing the nanny to shriek and drop her bag. Toys, snacks, and official documents scattered across the marble floor. The baby dragon tilted her head curiously, her golden eyes wide with innocent confusion at the adult's reaction. "They are just babies," Vala said softly, though she knew her words carried little weight. In the past 3 months, Smoke and Ember had driven away 12 babysitters. Each one had arrived with confidence and excellent references, only to flee within days, sometimes hours. The twin dragons did not mean harm, but their natural abilities combined with their playful nature created chaos wherever they went. Miss Scales gathered her scattered belongings with shaking hands. "Babies? Your Majesty, they set my certification documents on fire yesterday. And this morning, I found my shoes filled with pudding somehow transported from the kitchen 3 floors down. I cannot work under these conditions." She bowed quickly and rushed from the room, her purple scales glinting under the crystal chandeliers. Vala sighed deeply as she watched the nanny disappear down the corridor. The palace staff would gossip about this latest failure within the hour. Already whispers followed her through the halls about the impossible royal children and their mother's inability to control them. Some courtiers even suggested that the twins were cursed, though Vala knew better. Smoke and Ember were simply bored, lonely, and far too intelligent for their own good. The Emperor's advisor, old Minister Grey, entered the nursery cautiously. He had learned to knock loudly and wait for permission after Ember once teleported him into a supply closet by accident. "Your Imperial Majesty, perhaps we should consider alternative approaches to this childcare situation." "What do you suggest?" Vala asked, watching as Smoke attempted to stack toy blocks while floating upside down. The blocks kept falling, which only made him more determined to try again. "We have interviewed candidates from every known childcare species in the galaxy. The nurturing folk of the Andor system fled after one day. Even the Patient Caretaker Guild of Proxima refused to send another representative after what happened to their last 3 members. Minister Grey cleared his throat carefully. "I have been researching species known for their unconventional approach to dangerous situations. There is one group that keeps appearing in historical records for their ability to remain calm in the face of overwhelming odds." "Which species?" Vala asked, though she suspected she would not like the answer. Any species willing to care for her children at this point would likely have its own set of problems. "Humans, Your Majesty." Vala paused in surprise. Humans were relatively new to galactic society, having only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last century. Most species considered them fragile, short-lived, and lacking any natural defenses that would be useful in childcare. Humans? Minister Grey, they have no telepathic abilities, no natural armor, no enhanced strength or speed. How could they possibly handle children who can teleport and breathe fire? That is precisely why they might succeed where others have failed, Minister Grey replied, pulling out a small data tablet. "I have been studying human behavioral patterns in crisis situations. They have a remarkable tendency to remain calm when faced with circumstances that would terrify other species. Their military records show countless examples of humans walking into obviously dangerous situations, with nothing more than determination and basic equipment." Ember teleported next to Minister Grey and began tugging on his robes, wanting attention. Instead of backing away, the old advisor simply patted her head gently. "Additionally, humans have successfully raised young from multiple species during their integration into galactic society. They seem to possess an unusual patience with children, regardless of those children's natural abilities." Vala considered this information while watching Smoke finally succeed in stacking 3 blocks while floating. The baby dragon's proud chirp echoed through the room. But Minister Gray, what human would be willing to take such a position? Surely they have heard the stories about what happened to our previous babysitters. I believe we should post the position through official channels and see who responds, Minister Gray suggested. Humans have a saying about desperate times requiring desperate measures. Perhaps we will find someone who needs this opportunity as much as we need them. That evening, Vala approved the posting of a new employment notice to be distributed to all embassy networks. The job description was honest about the challenges involved, though it focused more on the children's intelligence and playfulness rather than the chaos they created. The salary offered was generous enough to attract attention but not so large as to seem suspicious. 3 days later, responses began arriving from across the galaxy. Most were from the usual species, though a few humans had indeed applied. Vala reviewed each application carefully, looking for any sign that the applicant truly understood what they were volunteering for. One application stood out, not because of impressive credentials or glowing recommendations, but because of a simple note at the bottom requesting permission to bring along an infant child. Minister Gray, Vala called, studying the human's application. Have any of our previous babysitters ever requested to bring their own children to work? Never, Your Majesty. Most species consider it highly unprofessional to mix personal childcare with professional duties. Vala smiled for the first time in weeks. Perhaps a human who was already caring for a baby would not be as easily frightened by 2 more children, even if those children happened to be dragons. She approved the application immediately, curious to meet someone brave enough or desperate enough to bring their own infant into the chaos of the royal nursery. The palace staff prepared for another failed experiment, but Vala felt a strange sense of hope. Sometimes the most unexpected solutions came from the most unlikely sources. Rose stepped off the transport shuttle with her baby daughter strapped securely to her chest in a soft carrier. The imperial palace rose before them like a mountain of gleaming crystal and gold, its towers reaching toward the purple sky of the dragon homeworld. Other passengers hurried past them toward the visitors' entrance, but Rose had been directed to a smaller side gate marked for official business. Baby Lily gurgled happily as they walked, her tiny hands reaching toward the floating gardens that drifted lazily around the palace exterior. At 6 months old, Lily had already traveled to more worlds than most beings saw in a lifetime. Rose's previous job as a xenobiology researcher had required constant movement between systems, and Lily had adapted to space travel with remarkable ease. The palace guards examined Rose's credentials with obvious confusion. One of them, a tall being with silver scales and 6 arms, kept glancing between the official employment documents and the small human woman holding a baby. "You are here for the royal babysitting position?" he asked in heavily accented galactic standard. "Yes, sir," Rose replied politely. "I have an appointment with Empress Vala in 20 minutes. The guard's companion, a creature that looked like a walking tree with glowing amber eyes, leaned closer. "You do know what happened to the last babysitter, yes? She left yesterday with purple skin and refused to explain why." Rose shifted Lily's carrier slightly, ensuring her daughter was comfortable. "I read the incident reports that were made available to applicants. It sounds like the royal children are very creative and energetic." Both guards exchanged glances that clearly said they thought the human was either very brave or very foolish. They processed her credentials and provided directions to the royal quarters, warning her to knock loudly and wait for permission before entering any room. The palace corridors were even more impressive than the exterior, with walls of polished stone that seemed to glow with inner light. Floating crystal sculptures provided soft illumination, and the air carried the faint scent of exotic flowers. Rose had studied draconian architecture during her university years, but experiencing it in person was breathtaking. Lily seemed equally fascinated, her dark eyes wide as she took in the alien surroundings. She had inherited her mother's curiosity about new environments, though at 6 months old, her interests were limited to whatever looked shiny or made interesting sounds. Minister Gray met them at the entrance to the royal quarters. The elderly advisor looked surprised by Rose's appearance, clearly having expected someone larger or more intimidating. "Miss Rose Williams, I presume? I am Minister Gray, advisor to the imperial family. Her Imperial Majesty will see you shortly, but first I must ask about your..." companion. "This is my daughter, Lily," Rose explained, gently patting the baby's back. "My application included a request for permission to bring her along." "I hope that was not a problem?" Minister Gray's expression was unreadable. "It is highly unusual. But given the circumstances, perhaps unusual is exactly what we need. Please follow me." They walked through several more corridors before arriving at a pair of massive doors carved with images of dragons in flight. Minister Gray knocked 3 times and waited for a response before opening them. The room beyond was clearly a formal audience chamber, with a throne of black marble surrounded by floating crystals that cast rainbow patterns on the walls. Empress Vala sat on the throne, wearing simple robes that somehow made her appear more regal than any elaborate costume could have. She was smaller than Rose had expected, though her golden eyes held the wisdom and weariness of someone who had ruled for decades. Most importantly, she did not look at Rose with the condescending expression that many aliens wore when meeting humans for the first time. "Miss Williams," the Empress said, her voice carrying clearly across the large room, "thank you for coming such a long distance. I understand you are a xenobiology researcher by training." Rose bowed as respectfully as she could while wearing a baby carrier. "Yes, Your Imperial Majesty. I specialized in interspecies communication and child development patterns. I completed my research degree last year." "And what brought you to apply for a child care position? Surely your scientific training would open other opportunities." This was the question Rose had been dreading. The truth was that her research funding had been cut when her project was deemed impractical by the university board. Single mothers with babies were not considered ideal candidates for most scientific positions, especially ones that required extensive travel. The royal babysitting job offered good pay, housing, and the chance to conduct informal behavioral research on one of the galaxy's most intelligent species. I believe that understanding how different species develop and learn can only happen through direct observation and interaction, Rose answered carefully. Working with your children would provide insights that no laboratory study could match. Empress Vala studied Rose for a long moment, then looked down at baby Lily, who was chewing contentedly on a colorful toy. "Your daughter is very quiet. Most human infants I have encountered are much more vocal. Lily has always been easygoing," Rose said with a smile. "She seems to enjoy new experiences rather than being frightened by them." "That is good," the Empress replied, though her tone suggested she was thinking of something else. "Miss Williams, I must be completely honest with you about what this position involves. My children are not ordinary babies. They possess natural abilities that can be challenging for caregivers to handle. Are you prepared for situations that might seem impossible or dangerous by human standards?" Rose considered her answer carefully. During her xenobiology studies, she had worked with juvenile beings from dozens of species, including some with telepathic abilities, natural camouflage, and even limited shape-shifting. Every species had unique challenges when it came to child rearing. "Your Imperial Majesty, I have learned that what seems dangerous is often just unfamiliar. I prefer to approach new situations with curiosity rather than fear." As if summoned by their conversation, 2 small shapes appeared at the edge of Rose's vision. The twin dragons crept into the audience chamber, moving with the careful stealth that only small children attempting to spy on adult conversations could manage. They were smaller than Rose had expected, each about the size of a house cat, with iridescent scales that shifted color as they moved. Lily noticed them immediately and let out a delighted squeal, reaching toward them with both hands. The sound made both dragon babies freeze in surprise, their large eyes focusing on the human infant with obvious curiosity. "It seems," Empress Vala said with the first genuine smile Rose had seen from her, "that introductions are already being made. Miss Williams, meet my children, Smoke and Ember." Rose's first morning in the royal nursery began with her bag bursting into flames. She had just finished feeding Lily her breakfast when Smoke emerged from behind a toy castle and breathed a small puff of fire directly onto Rose's supply bag. The flames were surprisingly contained, burning only the outer fabric while leaving the contents inside untouched. "Well," Rose said calmly, pulling a small fire extinguisher from her diaper bag. "That's one way to say good morning." She sprayed the flames efficiently, then began sorting through her supplies to check for damage. Lily watched the whole process with fascination, clapping her tiny hands at the pretty colors of the extinguisher foam. Smoke tilted his head in confusion. His fire breath usually made adults scream and run around in panic. This human simply put out the fire and continued unpacking as if nothing had happened. He tried again, this time aiming a careful puff at a toy elephant on the floor. Rose glanced over, noted which toy was burning, and calmly extinguished that fire too. "You're very good at that," she told Smoke conversationally. "Your fire control is impressive for someone so young. I bet with practice you could make some beautiful patterns." Meanwhile, Ember decided to test the new babysitter with her own specialty. She teleported Rose's shoes to different locations around the nursery, starting with obvious places like the toy box, then moving to more creative spots like inside a large stuffed animal and balanced on top of a bookshelf. Rose noticed her missing shoes and began searching methodically. "Let's see. Yesterday, Minister Gray mentioned that teleportation usually follows emotional patterns. If I was a young dragon who wanted to hide shoes, where would I put them?" She found the first shoe easily, thanked Ember politely for the game, then continued searching for the second one. The dragon twins exchanged glances. This was not going according to their usual script. By now, most babysitters were either crying, calling for help, or making angry demands for the chaos to stop. Rose just kept calmly solving each problem as it appeared, occasionally commenting on their technique in a way that sounded almost like praise. Determined to get a proper reaction, both twins decided to escalate their efforts. Smoke took a deep breath and produced his loudest, most terrifying roar. The sound echoed off the nursery walls and would have sent most adults running for the exit. Rose looked up from her shoe search, located the source of the noise, and nodded approvingly. "That's a very impressive roar," she said sincerely. "Your vocal control is remarkable. I've studied draconian vocal development, and most children your age can't achieve that level of volume and resonance." The roar had an unexpected side effect. Baby Lily, who had been dozing peacefully in her carrier, woke up with a start. Rose immediately moved to comfort her daughter, expecting tears or frightened crying. Instead, Lily's face broke into the biggest smile Rose had ever seen. The baby began laughing with pure delight, her whole body shaking with giggles as she stared at the dragon twins. Smoke and Ember froze in complete surprise. In their short lives, their roars had only ever produced fear, anger, or demands for silence. They had never heard laughter in response to their most intimidating sound. Lily's giggles were infectious and musical, a sound of such genuine joy that both dragons found themselves staring at her in wonder. Curious about this unexpected reaction, Ember tried a smaller roar, more of a chirp than a bellow. Lily's laughter doubled in volume, and she reached toward the dragons with both hands, clearly wanting to get closer to these amazing new friends. Rose, still holding one shoe and searching for the other, watched this interaction with growing amazement. "I think she likes you," Rose told the twins. "Lily has always enjoyed meeting new people, but I've never seen her this excited before." Encouraged by the positive response, Smoke decided to show off his other abilities. He began floating in small circles near the ceiling, creating puffs of colorful smoke that formed simple shapes. Lily clapped and babbled enthusiastically, trying to reach the pretty smoke rings from her carrier. Ember, not to be outdone, began teleporting from one spot to another around the nursery, each time appearing closer to the human baby. She discovered that Lily would laugh harder if she appeared in unexpected places, so she began using her teleportation as an elaborate game of peekaboo. Rose finally found her second shoe inside a large toy dragon and sat down to put it on. As she watched her daughter interact with the royal children, she began to understand what had really been happening with the previous babysitters. The dragon twins were not malicious or destructive by nature. They were bored, lonely, and desperate for positive attention. Their pranks were actually attempts to engage with their caregivers, but since most adults responded with fear or anger, the children had learned to expect negative reactions. They kept escalating their behavior, hoping to find someone who would interact with them as individuals, rather than treating them as dangerous creatures to be managed. Lily's innocent laughter had broken through that cycle in minutes. She saw the dragons as playmates rather than threats, and her genuine delight in their abilities made them want to entertain rather than frighten. Rose realized she was witnessing something remarkable, the moment when 3 babies discovered the joy of friendship across species lines. By mid-morning, the chaos had transformed into an impromptu play session. Smoke was creating smoke sculptures while floating in lazy loops. Ember was playing increasingly elaborate games of peekaboo, and Lily was providing enthusiastic applause for every new trick. Rose found herself relaxing for the first time since arriving at the palace. When lunchtime arrived, all three children were pleasantly tired from their games. Rose prepared bottles for Lily and helped the dragon twins with their meal, a specially prepared mixture that looked like colorful soup but smelled like flowers. To her surprise, both Smoke and Ember sat quietly while eating, occasionally chirping softly to Lily as if including her in their conversation. "I think," Rose said to no one in particular, "this is going to work out better than anyone expected." 3 weeks into her employment, Rose discovered that the royal nursery had become the most popular destination in the palace. Guards found excuses to patrol the corridor outside, just to hear the sound of children laughing. Kitchen staff volunteered to deliver meals personally, lingering to watch the amazing games happening inside. Even Minister Gray had begun taking his afternoon tea in the adjoining sitting room, claiming he needed to monitor the situation for security purposes. The transformation in Smoke and Ember was remarkable. The twins who had once terrorized professional babysitters now spent their days creating elaborate entertainment for their new human friend. They had learned that Lily's laughter was the most wonderful sound in their world, and they competed cheerfully to see who could make her giggle the loudest. Smoke had developed his fire breathing into an art form. He could now create smoke rings in different colors, tiny puffs that formed letters of the alphabet, and even small fireworks that sparkled harmlessly in the air. His favorite trick was making smoke pictures that told simple stories, complete with tiny smoke animals that chased each other around the nursery ceiling, while Lily shrieked with delight. Ember had discovered that her teleportation ability could be used for much more than hiding shoes. She had learned to appear and disappear in rhythm with music, creating a magical dance that fascinated the human baby. She could teleport toys to Lily's hands exactly when the baby reached for them, making Lily feel like she had magical powers too. Most impressively, Ember had figured out how to teleport herself and small objects in slow motion, creating beautiful light trails that looked like falling stars. Rose watched these developments with growing excitement. Her xenobiology training had taught her that play behavior in young beings was crucial for proper development, but she had never seen anything like the creative explosion happening in the royal nursery. The dragon twins were not just entertaining Lily. They were learning to use their natural abilities in positive, constructive ways. The breakthrough moment came on a rainy afternoon when all three children were feeling restless. Lily had been fussy all morning, missing her usual nap schedule due to the weather. Smoke and Ember were picking up on her mood, becoming increasingly agitated as their favorite audience remained unhappy. Rose was walking around the nursery, bouncing Lily gently and humming a lullaby her own mother had sung to her years ago. The melody was simple and soothing, designed to calm fretful babies. As she hummed, she noticed both dragon twins settling down, their restless movements becoming slower and more peaceful. Curious about their reaction, Rose began singing the lullaby with words. Her voice was nothing special by human standards, but the twins had never heard music like this before. Draconian songs were complex compositions with multiple harmonies and intricate rhythms. This human lullaby was simple, gentle, and filled with love. Smoke began humming along, his voice creating a soft bass harmony that complemented Rose's melody. Ember discovered she could teleport in time with the rhythm, appearing and disappearing like a visual representation of the song's beat. Together they created something new, a lullaby that combined human emotion with draconian magic. Lily stopped fussing and stared in wonder at her friends. As the song continued, her eyelids grew heavy, and she began the slow, peaceful breathing of a baby falling asleep. But instead of ending the song, Smoke and Ember continued their gentle performance, creating a cocoon of music and magic around the sleeping infant. When the lullaby finally ended, all three children were peacefully asleep. Rose stood in the middle of the nursery, hardly believing what she had witnessed. The dragon twins, who had never shown patience or gentleness with anyone before, had instinctively understood the need to help their friend rest. They had taken a human song and made it their own, creating something beautiful in the process. Minister Gray appeared in the doorway, having heard the unprecedented sound of singing from the nursery. He took in the scene of three sleeping children and Rose's amazed expression, then nodded with satisfaction. "I believe," he whispered, "we have found our solution." Word of the nursery's transformation reached Empress Vala that evening. She had been attending a diplomatic meeting in another wing of the palace, but reports of her children's behavior had been filtering in throughout the day. Palace staff described scenes that seemed impossible, the royal twins playing gently, sharing toys, and actually helping to care for the human baby. When Vala visited the nursery after dinner, she found Rose reading quietly while all three children napped together on a large cushioned mat. Smoke and Ember had positioned themselves protectively on either side of Lily, their wings slightly spread to shelter her from drafts. It was the most peaceful scene Vala had witnessed in the nursery since her children were born. "They have never slept so soundly," she told Rose in amazement. Usually, nap time requires at least one of them to be floating near the ceiling, refusing to settle down. Rose smiled, careful not to wake the children. "I think they were just lonely before. Having a friend their own age has made all the difference. They're wonderful children, Your Imperial Majesty. They just needed someone to see their abilities as gifts rather than problems." Over the following days, the changes continued to multiply. The dragon twins began showing consideration for others throughout the palace. They stopped teleporting into restricted areas, kept their fire breathing contained to appropriate spaces, and even began helping with simple tasks like organizing toys and books. Most remarkably, they had learned to regulate their abilities based on their audience. Around palace staff, they remained calm and controlled. But when it was just the three children and Rose, they unleashed their full creativity, turning the nursery into a wonderland of color, light, and music. The sound of children's laughter had become the palace's favorite soundtrack, replacing the nervous whispers and worried conversations that had dominated the royal quarters for months. Smoke and Ember had discovered that being loved was far more satisfying than being feared, and they embraced their new role as big siblings to their human friend with wholehearted enthusiasm. 2 months after Rose's arrival, the royal nursery had become an unofficial research laboratory for interspecies child development. Rose had begun documenting the daily interactions between the three children, creating detailed notes about their games, communication patterns, and the remarkable ways they had learned to accommodate each other's different abilities. The morning routine had evolved into a carefully choreographed dance of friendship. Lily would wake first, as human babies often did, and her soft babbling would gently rouse the dragon twins. Smoke had learned to create warm, colorful smoke clouds that helped everyone wake up gradually, while Ember would teleport small toys within Lily's reach to keep her entertained while Rose prepared breakfast. Rose had introduced several human games that the dragons had enthusiastically adapted. Peekaboo became an elaborate performance where Ember would teleport between hiding spots, while Smoke created smoke screens for dramatic effect. Patty Cake evolved into a complex rhythm game where all three children would clap, chirp, and babble in synchronized patterns that sounded almost like music. The most successful addition had been a simple game of catch. Rose had brought soft, colorful balls that were safe for all three children to handle. Lily could grab them and wave them around. Smoke could gently push them through the air with controlled puffs of breath, and Ember could teleport them from one location to another. What started as a simple game had become an intricate activity that required cooperation, timing, and patience from all participants. Palace staff had stopped treating the nursery as a dangerous area to be avoided. Instead, it had become a source of daily entertainment and wonder. Cook Maria would bring special treats for the children, staying to watch as Smoke carefully heated Lily's food to the perfect temperature, with precisely controlled fire breath. Head gardener Tom had begun growing flowers, specifically for the nursery after discovering that Ember could teleport fresh blooms directly into decorative arrangements. The children's influence had spread beyond their immediate caretakers. Young servants and guards began requesting assignments near the royal quarters, hoping to catch glimpses of the amazing games happening in the nursery. The palace's atmosphere had shifted from nervous tension to cheerful anticipation, as if everyone was waiting to discover what delightful surprise the children would create next. Rose had also noticed significant changes in her own daughter. Lily was developing faster than human babies typically did, likely stimulated by her constant exposure to new experiences and challenges. She was attempting to crawl earlier than expected, motivated by her desire to get closer to her dragon friends. Her babbling had taken on musical qualities that seemed to mimic the dragon's chirping patterns. Most remarkably, she showed no fear of fire, teleportation, or flying creatures. experiences that would terrify most human children. The dragon twins were equally affected by their friendship with Lily. Their natural empathy had blossomed under the influence of caring for someone smaller and more vulnerable than themselves. They had learned to gentle their strength, control their abilities, and consider the needs of others before acting. These were lessons that typically took draconian children years to master, but Smoke and Ember had absorbed them naturally through their daily interactions with their human friend. Empress Vala had become a regular visitor to the nursery, often bringing her official work to complete while watching the children play. She was amazed by her twins' development, particularly their growing emotional intelligence and social skills. During one visit, she witnessed Smoke carefully drying Lily's tears with warm, gentle puffs of air after the baby had bumped her head on a toy, while Ember teleported Lily's favorite stuffed animal directly into her arms for comfort. "They have learned compassion," Vala told Rose that afternoon. "In our culture, empathy and kindness are considered the highest virtues, but they are usually taught through formal lessons and careful instruction. My children have discovered these qualities naturally through friendship." Rose had been thinking about this phenomenon extensively. Her background in xenobiology had prepared her to observe and document behavioral changes, but she had not expected to witness such rapid and profound development. The three children were essentially raising each other, learning from their differences while building on their similarities. The language development was particularly fascinating. While Lily was too young to speak, she had begun making specific sounds that the dragons clearly understood as communication. Smoke and Ember had developed a simplified version of their natural chirping language that seemed designed to include their human friend. They would chirp a question, wait for Lily's babbled response, then continue the conversation as if they understood perfectly. Evening routines had become even more magical than mornings. The three children had established a bedtime ritual that required no adult intervention. Smoke would create gentle, shifting patterns of colored light on the ceiling, like a living nightlight that responded to the children's moods. Ember would gather all the favorite toys and stuffed animals, teleporting them into a cozy nest around Lily's sleeping area. Then all three would settle down together, with the dragon twins positioning themselves where they could watch over their human friend while she slept. Rose found herself learning as much from the children as they were learning from each other. Their natural acceptance of differences, their instinctive cooperation, and their pure joy in each other's company provided lessons that no university course could have taught. She had come to the palace seeking employment, but she had discovered something far more valuable, a new understanding of how different species could not only coexist but thrive together. The success in the nursery had begun, attracting attention from beyond the palace walls. Other noble families with challenging children had begun requesting consultations. Xenobiology researchers from across the galaxy were sending communications asking for Rose's observations and data. The simple job of babysitting had evolved into something that might change how interspecies childcare was understood throughout the known worlds. 6 months after Rose's arrival, the transformation was complete. The royal nursery had become the heart of the palace, and the sound of children's laughter had replaced the whispered concerns that once echoed through the corridors. What had begun as a desperate solution to a childcare crisis had evolved into something unprecedented in galactic society. A true interspecies family built on understanding, acceptance, and love. The changes were visible to everyone who visited the palace. Diplomatic guests often requested tours that included the nursery, wanting to witness the famous harmony between human and dragon children. Trade representatives would pause in their negotiations to listen to the musical games echoing from the royal quarters. Even the most formal state ceremonies had been brightened by the children's influence, as Smoke and Ember had learned to create beautiful aerial displays for special occasions, while Lily provided delighted applause from her special viewing area. Rose's official contract had expired weeks ago, but no one had mentioned renewing it because the arrangement had clearly become permanent. She was no longer just an employee but a valued member of the royal household. Her quarters had been expanded to include a proper research area, where she documented the children's development, and she had been given a staff position that allowed her to develop new childcare protocols based on her success. The most significant change had come from Empress Vala herself. Watching her children thrive under Rose's care had taught her valuable lessons about parenting across species lines. She had begun spending more informal time with all three children, joining their games and learning from their natural approach to friendship. The formal distance that draconian royalty traditionally maintained from their offspring had given way to something warmer and more connected. On this particular morning, the nursery hosted a special celebration. Lily had taken her first independent steps the day before, toddling unsteadily from Rose's arms toward Smoke and Ember, who had been floating at ground level specifically to encourage her walking attempts. The dragon twins had been more excited about this milestone than anyone else, creating elaborate smoke fireworks and teleporting flower petals to rain down in celebration. Now, a small party was underway to mark the occasion. Cook Maria had prepared special treats that all three children could enjoy, including tiny cakes that Smoke could safely warm with his breath, and finger foods that Lily could manage with her new mobility. Minister Gray had arranged for musicians to provide background music, though their formal compositions could barely be heard over the children's own musical games. The guest of honor was Ambassador Chen from the Human Embassy, who had traveled specifically to observe the unprecedented success of interspecies childcare. She watched in amazement as Lily toddled confidently between her dragon friends, showing no fear as they flew gentle circles around her or created colorful smoke patterns for her entertainment. "I have never seen anything like this," Ambassador Chen told Empress Vala. "Human children raised in multi-species environments usually show some wariness or preference for their own kind. But your daughter treats these children as if species differences don't exist. That is because, for them, those differences truly don't matter," Vala replied, watching as Ember carefully teleported Lily's dropped toy back within her reach. "They have never known a world where friendship was limited by what species you were born into." Rose bounced, baby number 2, for she had recently learned she was expecting, again, and marveled at how much her life had changed. When she had applied for this position, she had been a single mother struggling to support herself and her daughter. Now she was part of something larger, a family that spanned species and had captured the attention of the entire galaxy. The children had grown beyond their original personalities. Smoke had become the gentle protector, using his abilities to help and comfort others. His fire breathing had evolved into a tool for warming food, creating light for reading, and producing the beautiful displays that brought joy to everyone around him. Ember had developed into the problem solver, using her teleportation to help with daily tasks and to ensure that everyone had what they needed when they needed it. Lily had become the bridge between worlds, equally comfortable with human customs and dragon games, equally loved by both species. Their influence had spread far beyond the palace walls. The success story had inspired other families to attempt interspecies adoption and childcare arrangements. Several universities had established new research programs focused on cross-species child development. Most importantly, a new generation of children was growing up with a fundamentally different understanding of what it meant to be part of a galactic community. As the party continued, Rose found herself in conversation with visitors from across the known worlds, all eager to understand how such harmony had been achieved. The answer was always the same. They had simply treated the children as individuals rather than representatives of their species, focusing on their personalities and needs rather than their abilities or origins. Late that evening, after the guests had departed and the party decorations had been cleared away, the nursery returned to its peaceful routine. The three children settled into their usual sleeping arrangement, with Smoke and Ember creating a protective circle around Lily's bed while she clutched her favorite stuffed dragon in her tiny arms. Rose stood in the doorway, watching over the sleeping children and reflecting on the journey that had brought them all together. She had come to the palace seeking a job and had found a family. The dragon twins had gained not just a babysitter but a sister and a second mother. Lily had grown up with magical friends who would shape her understanding of the universe. And Empress Vala had discovered that love and understanding could overcome any challenge, no matter how impossible it seemed. The future stretched ahead with infinite possibilities. The children would grow up together, learning from each other and creating new traditions that combined the best of all their cultures. Rose's research would help other families build similar bonds across species lines. Most importantly, they had proven that friendship, laughter, and love were truly universal languages that could bridge any gap. As Rose turned off the lights and headed to her own quarters, the nursery filled with the gentle sounds of peaceful sleep, soft breathing from the human baby, contented chirps from the dragon twins, and the quiet hum of a family that had formed not through blood or species, but through the simple miracle of children who had chosen to love each other exactly as they were.